The first thing I heard wasn't the steady beeping of machines or the hushed voices of medical staff. It was laughter. It's familiar laughter that sent ice through my veins even before my eyes could focus. That's when I saw her standing in front of the hospital room mirror, twirling in silken lace that didn't belong to her. My sister Rachel was wearing my $15,000 custom Vera Wang wedding dress, admiring herself while I lay supposedly unconscious just 10 feet away. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It fits perfectly, she whispered to someone I couldn't see, yet almost like it was meant for me. The voice that answered made my blood run cold. You look beautiful, babe. Emma never could have worn it like you do. Brad, my fiancé. My Brad was standing in my hospital room, watching my sister model my wedding dress while I was in a coma. That's when something inside me made a decision that would change everything. Instead of sitting up and screaming, instead of demanding answers, I forced my eyes shut and kept my breathing steady. Something told me that if they knew I was awake, I'd never learn the truth about what had really happened to me. 6 weeks earlier, I had been Emma Richardson, 28 years old and on top of the world. I ran the marketing division at Richardson Industries, the manufacturing company my father had built from nothing before his death 5 years ago. I lived in a downtown condo that I'd bought with my own money, drove a BMW that I'd earned through 70-hour work weeks, and was engaged to Brad Mitchell, a construction company owner who'd swept me off my feet with his charm and ambition. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Rachel, my younger sister, had always been the free spirit of the family. Where I'd thrown myself into business school and corporate climbing, she'd drifted from art school to yoga instructor certification, to whatever caught her fancy that month. Mom always said Rachel had a sensitive soul, and I'd started to suspect she just had an expensive lifestyle and no desire to pay for it herself. The warning signs had been there, but I'd been too busy planning my wedding and managing a major product launch to notice them. Rachel had been asking a lot of questions about Dad's will lately. She'd started showing up at family dinners with designer handbags and clothes that cost more than most people's rent. When I'd asked her about it, she'd just smiled and said she'd been lucky with some investments. Brad had been acting strange too. Hushed phone calls that ended when I entered the room. Sudden business trips that didn't quite add up when I tried to piece together his schedule. He'd been pushing to move up our wedding date, claiming he couldn't wait to make me his wife. But something in his eyes didn't match his romantic words. The night of March 15th, everything came crashing down. I'd gotten home from work to find Brad's laptop open on my kitchen counter, displaying an email thread that made my stomach drop. The messages were between Brad and someone named Mike, discussing the Richardson situation and how much longer they'd have to keep up the act. There were references to Rachel and something called the backup plan. I'd tried calling Brad immediately, but his phone went straight to voicemail. That's when I'd noticed Rachel's car wasn't in the driveway of the family estate where she'd been staying since her latest relationship ended. Against my better judgment, I'd grabbed my keys and headed out into the storm to find answers. The roads were slick with rain, and visibility was almost zero. I'd been driving toward Brad's construction. Sight offaced when my brakes had failed. Not gradually, not with warning, but completely and suddenly. One moment I was slowing for a red light, and the next I was flying through the intersection toward an oncoming truck.
Ow.
The last thing I remembered was the sound of metal crushing metal, and the terrifying realization that something was very, very wrong. Now, lying in this hospital bed 6 weeks later, I was starting to understand exactly how wrong things had been. As Rachel continued to admire herself in my dress, I kept my breathing steady and my eyes closed, listening to every word. "Are you sure she's not going to wake up?" Rachel asked, her voice carrying a note of anxiety. "Dr. Chen says her brain activity is minimal," Brad replied. "Even if she does wake up, there's a good chance she won't remember anything from before. The accident. Traumatic brain injuries can cause severe memory loss. And the wedding is happening exactly as planned. The venue thinks it's sweet that you're stepping in to honor your sister's wishes. The guests think it's romantic that I'm not letting tragedy stop our love story. Everyone's buying it, Rachel. In 2 weeks, you'll be Mrs. Mitchell, and that inheritance will be ours. My inheritance." the $50 million that Dad had left in a trust that would activate when I turned 30 or got married, whichever came first. The inheritance that required me to be alive and married to claim it. Suddenly, everything made horrible sense. "What about Mom?" Rachel asked, and I heard the rustle of fabric as she turned away from the mirror. "Your mother's been very cooperative. She understands that Emma's medical bills are going to be enormous, and that the family needs financial stability. She's already signed the papers transferring Emma's power of attorney to you." Power of attorney. They were planning to control my medical decisions, my finances, everything. And if I died, well, that would solve a lot of problems for them, wouldn't it? "I still can't believe the brakes actually failed," Rachel said, and I heard something that might have been genuine regret in her voice. "When Mike said he could make it look like an accident, I didn't think." "Don't think about that now," Brad interrupted sharply. "What's done is done. We're committed to this path and there's no going back. Emma's not going to wake up. And even if she does, who's going to believe the word of a brain-damaged woman over her loving sister and devoted fiancé? They'd sabotaged my car. Rachel, my own sister, had conspired with Brad to cause the accident that put me here. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I'd felt during my recovery. This wasn't just about money or jealousy. They'd tried to kill me. "I need to get back downstairs before visiting ours end," Rachel said. "Are you staying?" "For a few more minutes. I want to make sure she's stable before I leave. Can't have the grieving fiancé seeming heartless, can we?" I heard Rachel's footsteps move toward the door, but she paused. "Brad, do you ever feel guilty about any of this?" "She's my sister. We grew up together. Your sister who got everything handed to her while you got nothing. Your sister who was going to inherit $50 million just for existing while you struggled to pay your credit card bills. Don't romanticize this, Rachel. Emma never cared about anyone but herself. We're just evening the playing field." "You're right," Rachel said, but her voice sounded hollow. "I'll see you tomorrow. We need to finalize the catering numbers." After she left, Brad moved closer to my bed. I could smell his cologne, the same scent that used to make me feel safe and loved. Now it made my skin crawl. "Brad seemed so devoted," Mom said. "He was asking about the insurance policies yesterday, making sure Emma's medical care will be covered no matter what happens. Such a thoughtful man. Insurance policies, of course. If I died, Brad and Rachel would get not only the inheritance, but also my life insurance. The financial motive was even bigger than I'd thought. "Mom, there's something we need to discuss," Rachel said, and her tone grew serious. "The doctors haven't been entirely honest with you about Emma's prognosis. Dr. Chen told me privately that even if she wakes up, she may never be the same. Brain damage can affect everything: memory, personality, cognitive function. She might need full-time care for the rest of her life." "Oh my God," Mom gasped. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because the medical team wanted to be sure before they alarmed you. But Rachel and I need to be realistic about what we're facing here. It was a masterful manipulation." Rachel was laying the groundwork for the idea that even if I woke up, I wouldn't be competent to challenge their story. And Mom, who'd always been easily influenced, was buying every word. "What does this mean for the wedding?" Mom asked. "It means we're doing the right thing by moving forward," Rachel said. "Emma would want Brad to be happy. She'd want the family business to be stable. And if she recovers enough to understand what's happening, she'll be grateful that we didn't let her accident destroy everything she worked for." "You're such a good sister," Mom said, and I heard her start to cry. "Emma is so lucky to have you." "We're lucky to have each other," Rachel replied. But when she spoke again, her voice had moved closer to my bed. "All of us, after they left, I lay in the darkness, processing everything I'd learned. Rachel was smarter than I'd given her credit for. She wasn't just stealing my life. She was rewriting the narrative to make herself the hero of the story. By the time their plan was complete, everyone would believe that she'd sacrificed her own happiness to honor her comatose sister's wishes. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They assumed I was helpless, that I would never wake up, or that if I did, I'd be too damaged to fight back. They didn't know that I was awake, aware, and planning my own strategy for survival and revenge. The next few days fell into a pattern. During the day, I gathered intelligence from medical staff, visitors, and overheard conversations. I learned that Tyler Martinez, my best friend and assistant at Richardson Industries, had been asking about visiting me. He'd been told that family was limiting visitors to reduce stress on my system. Tyler knew me better than anyone. If I could somehow communicate with him, he might be able to help. I also learned that attorney Robert Hayes had been meeting with Rachel and Mom about estate planning and medical power of attorney issues. Hayes had been the family lawyer since Dad's death, and he'd always seemed trustworthy, but lawyers followed money just like everyone else. Most importantly, I learned that Brad had been visiting the hospital at odd hours, sometimes staying after official visiting hours ended. He'd charmed the night staff into giving him access, claiming he couldn't sleep and wanted to be near his injured fiancé. But I suspected his real purpose was to monitor my condition, and possibly to act if I showed signs of waking up. On the fourth night, after I'd regained consciousness, I got my chance to start fighting back. Brad arrived around midnight, when the floor was quiet and only a skeleton crew was on duty. I heard him talking quietly with someone in the hallway before entering my room. "Any changes?" he asked whoever was with him. "None visible," a voice replied. I didn't recognize the speaker, but he sounded official, like medical staff. "Her vitals are stable. Brain activity is minimal. If anything, she seems to be slipping deeper into the coma." That was a lie. My vitals had been improving daily, and Dr. Chun's latest notes had shown increased brain activity. Either this person wasn't really medical staff, or they were deliberately misrepresenting my condition. "Good," Brad said. "The wedding is in 10 days. We just need her to stay stable until then. And after that, complications can arise. Equipment failures happen. Medication errors occur. Hospitals can be dangerous places for vulnerable patients. I understand. It'll be handled carefully. Make sure it is. Nothing that raises suspicions. It needs to look completely natural." After the conversation ended, I heard footsteps moving away, but Brad remained in my room. He approached my bed, and I felt him checking my pulse, watching my breathing. He was looking for any sign that I might be conscious, but I'd gotten good at maintaining the illusion of deep unconsciousness. "Just a few more days, Emma," he whispered, "and this will all be over, and everyone can move on with their lives." Everyone except me, obviously. But Brad had no idea that I was already planning to move on with my life without him, without Rachel. And with enough evidence to put them both in prison for attempted murder and conspiracy, the next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Tyler Martinez arrived during regular visiting hours. Having apparently convinced someone to let him see me, despite the family restrictions, Tyler was my closest friend, and the one person who knew me well enough to potentially see through any deception. "Hey, Em," he said softly, settling into the chair beside my bed. "I'm so sorry it took me this long to get in here. Your sister said you weren't ready for visitors, but I finally convinced them that you needed to hear a friendly voice." Tyler had always been intuitive about people and situations. If anyone could figure out that something was wrong with my family's story, it would be him. "Things at the office are crazy without you," he continued. "The Henderson project is falling apart, and nobody can find the client files you were working on before the accident. Rachel came by to collect your personal items from your desk, but she seemed more interested in your computer files than your family photos. That was significant. Rachel had been going through my work files, probably looking for anything that might connect to Dad's business or the inheritance terms. But Tyler had noticed her behavior, which meant he was already suspicious. I need to tell you something," Tyler said, and his voice grew more serious. "I don't think your accident was really an accident. I know that sounds paranoid, but hear me out. If my heart rate monitor had been more sensitive, it would have showed a spike at that moment." Tyler was already questioning the official story. "Your brakes failed completely, right? But you just had your car serviced 2 weeks before the accident." I checked with the BMW dealership, and they said the brakes were in perfect condition. They have documentation of the inspection. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Complete brake failure in a car that knew with that maintenance record. It's almost impossible unless someone tampered with them. Tyler had done his research. He was thinking like an investigator, not just a grieving friend. This was exactly what I needed, And another thing, he continued. Brad's been asking a lot of questions about your business holdings in the Richardson Industries board structure. He wanted to know about voting rights, succession plans, all kinds of things that shouldn't matter to a construction company owner. Why would he care about corporate governance unless he was planning to have a say in it? The wedding announcement in the paper was weird too. It mentioned that the ceremony would honor your wishes and celebrate the love that transcends tragedy. Who talks like that? It sounds like something written by committee, not by someone who's actually grieving. Tyler was putting together all the pieces that hadn't made sense to other people. His suspicions could be the key to my survival. But I needed to find a way to communicate with him without exposing myself to Brad and Rachel. I'm going to figure out what really happened to you, Em, Tyler said firmly. And if someone hurt you deliberately, I'm going to make sure they pay for it. You're my best friend, and I won't let anyone get away with this. After Tyler left, I felt hope for the first time since I'd woken up. I wasn't alone in this fight. Tyler was already investigating, and he had the skills and resources to uncover the truth. I just needed to find a way to guide his investigation without putting either of us in danger. That afternoon brought another piece of the puzzle when Dr. Chen arrived with concerning news for Nurse Patty. I've been reviewing Emma's medication chart, he said, and there are some irregularities I need to investigate. Someone has been adjusting her sedation levels without my authorization. The changes are subtle, but they're definitely there. Who would have access to make those changes? Patty asked. Family members can't adjust medications directly, but they can request changes through the nursing staff. And if someone had connections with hospital personnel, they might be able to influence treatment decisions. Brad's mystery accomplice. Someone on the medical staff was helping him keep me unconscious. Probably the same person who'd been misrepresenting my condition. But Dr. Chen was onto them, which meant the timeline for their plan might be accelerating. I want Emma's medications monitored more closely, Dr. Chen ordered. No changes without my direct approval, and I want documentation of every person who enters her room. If someone is interfering with her treatment, we need to catch them. Should we notify hospital security? Patty asked. Not yet. I want to gather more evidence first. But yes, we may need to involve security if this continues. This was my chance. Dr. Chen was already suspicious of the people around me, and he was taking steps to protect me. If I could somehow communicate with him, he might be willing to help expose the conspiracy. That evening, as Dr. Chen made his final rounds, I took a calculated risk. When he checked my pupils with his pen light, I allowed my left eye to track the light slightly. It's just enough to suggest emerging consciousness, but not enough to indicate full awareness. Interesting, Dr. Chen murmured. Emma, if you can hear me, try to follow the light again. I let my eye track once more, then stopped, as if the effort had exhausted me. Nurse Johnson, Dr. Chen called. I need you to see this. Patty came over as Dr. Chen repeated the test. This time, I didn't respond at all, letting them think it had been a momentary breakthrough that had already faded. Was that voluntary eye movement? Patty asked. It appeared to be. We may be looking at the early stages of emergence from the coma. I want to increase monitoring and reduce the sedation slightly to see if we get more responses. Should I inform the family? Not yet. Sometimes patients can hear and understand before they can respond consistently. If family members are too eager or pushy during this delicate phase, it can actually slow recovery. Let's give her a few more days to stabilize before we raise anyone's hopes. Perfect. Dr. Chen was buying me time and limiting my family's access to information about my condition. He didn't know he was protecting me from people who wanted me dead, but his medical caution was working in my favor. As the night shift took over, I reflected on everything I'd learned and planned my next moves. I had allies now, Tyler, Dr. Chen, and potentially Marcus and Patty, even if they didn't know they were allies yet. I had evidence of tampering with my medications and suspicious behavior from Brad and Rachel, and I had 10 days until the wedding to expose their plan and save my own life. But I also knew that as my condition appeared to improve, Brad and Rachel would become more desperate. They couldn't afford for me to wake up and ruin their scheme, which meant the most dangerous part of this ordeal was just beginning. The 7th day after my awakening brought the most terrifying visitor yet. I'd learned to recognize footsteps in the hallway, and these belonged to someone I'd never heard before. Heavy, deliberate, with the confident stride of someone accustomed to authority. When the person entered my room, I caught a whiff of expensive cologne mixed with something clinical that made my skin crawl. "So this is the famous Emma Richardson," a gravelly voice said. "She doesn't look like much trouble to me." "Looks can be deceiving," Brad replied, and I realized he'd been waiting in my room for this meeting. "Her vital signs have been improving, and Dr. Chen is asking too many questions about her medication protocols. Dr. Chen won't be a problem much longer. I've arranged for him to be transferred to another floor next week. Personal request from administration, citing staff rotation needs. His replacement will be much more cooperative." My blood turned to ice. They were removing Dr. Chen, the one person who'd been protecting me medically. Without him monitoring my care, they'd have free rein to do whatever they wanted. "What about the nurses?" Brad asked. "Patty Johnson is scheduled for vacation starting tomorrow. It's 2 weeks in Florida with her grandchildren. It's all expenses paid, courtesy of an anonymous hospital appreciation fund." Amazing how grateful people become when you solve their financial problems. They were systematically removing everyone who might notice suspicious changes in my condition. This level of planning and resource coordination suggested the mystery man had significant influence within the hospital system. "The timeline remains the same," the voice continued. "Wedding in 8 days. Tragic complications shortly after. Natural progression of brain injury. Very sad but not uncommon. The grieving widower will inherit everything according to the terms of her father's will. And if she shows signs of waking up before then, she won't. I've prepared a special cocktail that will ensure she remains comfortable and unconscious. Completely undetectable in standard blood work, metabolizes quickly, and mimics the natural progression of brain injury complications. They weren't just planning to kill me. They were planning to poison me slowly, making it look like my condition was deteriorating naturally. The casual way they discussed my murder made me want to scream, but I forced myself to remain perfectly still. "There's one more thing," Brad said, and his tone grew nervous. "Tyler Martinez has been asking questions. He's been calling the dealership where Emma had her car serviced, talking to mechanics, requesting maintenance records. He's also been trying to access her work computer files. How much does he know? Too much. He's figured out that the brake failure wasn't accidental, and he's been asking other employees about the inheritance structure, the board composition, things like that. If he keeps digging, then we stop him from digging. Simple traffic accident, happens all the time. Distracted driver, slippery roads, very tragic. You want to kill Tyler too? I want to eliminate potential problems before they become actual problems. Your girlfriend's sister is already nervous about this whole situation. If word gets out that people are investigating the accident, Rachel might panic and do something stupid. The casual mention of murdering Tyler made my heart pound so hard I was afraid they'd hear it. Tyler was getting close to the truth, but his investigation was putting him in mortal danger. I had to find a way to warn him without exposing myself. "Fine," Brad agreed reluctantly, "but make it look completely unrelated to Emma's situation. Different area of town, different circumstances. Leave the details to me. I've been handling problems like this for longer than you've been alive." After they left, I lay in the darkness, my mind racing with horror and determination. These weren't just greedy relatives stealing an inheritance. This was an organized conspiracy involving hospital staff, potentially administration, and someone with the resources and connections to arrange multiple murders. The scope of what I was facing was far beyond what I'd initially imagined. But knowledge was power, and now I knew exactly how much danger Tyler was in. I also knew that my window for action was closing rapidly, Dr. Chen being transferred, and Patty going on vacation. I'd lose my primary protectors within days. I had to make my move soon, but I needed more evidence and a solid plan. The next morning brought unexpected hope in the form of Sophie Chen, Dr. Chen's daughter who worked in hospital administration. She'd come to check on some paperwork related to my insurance coverage, but her real purpose became clear when she lingered after completing her official business. "Emma," she said quietly, "my father has been concerned about some irregularities in your case. He's asked me to do some unofficial research into your medical records and treatment protocols." Sophie was speaking as if she expected me to hear her, which suggested Dr. Chen had shared his suspicions about my level of consciousness. There have been medication adjustments that weren't authorized by your primary physician. Someone with administrative access has been overriding his orders. My father wanted me to tell you that he's documenting everything, building a case to present to hospital security and potentially law enforcement. This was exactly what I needed to hear. Dr. Chen wasn't just suspicious. He was actively investigating the tampering with my treatment. His daughter's involvement suggested they understood this was bigger than simple medical malpractice. There's something else, Sophie continued, glancing toward the door to make sure no one was listening. My father is being transferred to the cardiac wing next week. Administration claimed it was routine staff rotation, but the timing is suspicious. He wanted you to know that he's arranged for certain protections to remain in place even after. He's no longer your primary physician. Sophie moved closer to my bed and lowered her voice even further. If you can hear me, Emma, and if you're in any danger from people who should be protecting you. My father has left instructions with a colleague he trusts completely, Dr. Amanda Foster, in the neurology department. Case, and she's already been briefed on the situation. The relief I felt was overwhelming. Dr. Chen had anticipated the attempt to remove him and had arranged for continuity of protection. But I still needed to find a way to communicate vital information about the threats to Tyler and the broader conspiracy. One more thing, Sophie said, pulling out her phone. My father asked me to play something for you. He said it might help. With your recovery, what she played wasn't music. It was Tyler's voice, recorded during a phone conversation with Dr. Chen. Doctor, I'm convinced that Emma's accident wasn't accidental, Tyler's voice said. I've been investigating, and there are too many inconsistencies. It's the brake failure, the timing, the financial motives. I think someone tried to kill her, and I think they might try again. What evidence do you have? Dr. Chen's voice replied, mechanical evidence from the car, financial records showing Brad's construction company is heavily in debt, insurance. Policy information that Rachel had no business knowing about. I've also discovered that Emma was planning to confront Brad about something the night of the accident. Her assistant said she seemed upset and determined about something. Mr. Martinez, I want you to be very careful. If your suspicions are correct, then Emma may still be in danger, and your investigation could put you at risk as well. I understand, but I can't just sit back and let them get away with this. Emma's my best friend. If someone hurt her, I'm going to make sure they pay for it. Sophie stopped the recording and looked directly at my face. My father wanted you to hear that. Tyler is doing everything he can to help you, but he doesn't know how much danger he's in. If there was some way you could communicate information to help protect him, this was my chance. I've been practicing. Subtle responses that could seem like involuntary reflexes, and now I needed to use them to send a message. When Sophie moved her hand near my face to check my temperature, I let my breathing change slightly, then return to normal. Did you feel that? Sophie asked, her voice excited. Your breathing pattern shifted when I mentioned Tyler being in danger? I repeated the response, making it slightly more pronounced this time. You can hear me, can't you? Sophie whispered. You're conscious but pretending not to be for your own protection? Very carefully, I allowed my right eye to flutter slightly, just enough to confirm her suspicion without making it obvious to anyone else who might be watching. Oh my God, Sophie breathed. Emma, if you can understand me, I need you to know that we're going to help you, but I need information. Can you somehow indicate if Tyler is in immediate danger? I let my breathing shift again, more dramatically this time. And Brad? Is he involved in the conspiracy? Another breathing change. What about your sister Rachel? Same response. Are there others? People in the hospital? When I gave the same signal, Sophie's face went pale. Hospital staff are involved? That's why my father is being transferred. I managed the slightest nod, so subtle it could be mistaken for an involuntary muscle spasm. Emma, we need to get you out of this situation, but we have to be smart about it. If they know you're conscious, they'll accelerate whatever they're planning. Can you hold on for a few more days while we build a case? I gave her the breathing. Signal for yes. I'm going to arrange for Tyler to meet with Dr. Foster tomorrow. We'll find a way to share information without exposing you. But Emma, you need to be extra careful. Don't respond to anyone else the way you've responded to me. Your life depends on maintaining this deception. After Sophie left, I felt like I'd taken a huge step forward, but I also realized how precarious my position had become. Multiple people now knew or suspected that I was conscious, which meant the secret was becoming harder to keep. But it also meant I had allies who were actively working to protect me and expose the conspiracy. That afternoon brought Rachel for her daily visit, but this time she wasn't alone. She'd brought someone I didn't recognize, a woman with a sharp voice and expensive shoes, who immediately began discussing wedding arrangements as if I wasn't even there. "The flowers for the bouquet are perfect," the woman said. "White roses and baby's breath, very traditional and tasteful. The photographer understands that this is a sensitive situation and will focus on the beauty of the moment rather than the tragic circumstances." "What about the guest list?" Rachel asked. "Some people have been asking awkward questions about why we're moving forward with the wedding while Emma is still unconscious. Let them ask. You're honoring your sister's wishes and supporting the man she loved during his darkest hour. Anyone who questions that lacks compassion and understanding." Wedding planner. Rachel had hired a professional wedding planner to orchestrate my stolen wedding. The audacity was breathtaking. "The venue coordinator wanted to confirm the final head count," the planner continued. 150 guests, including family, friends, and business associates. The Richardson Industries board members will all be attending, which should help legitimize the transition of authority. Authority transition. They weren't just stealing my identity and inheritance. They were planning to take over my position at the family company. The board members who'd known me since childhood would be witnessing what they thought was a romantic gesture of devotion, never suspecting they were accessories to fraud and murder. "Has anyone else been asking questions about Emma's condition?" Rachel asked. "Brad mentioned that her friend Tyler has been persistent about visiting. He's been told that family is limiting access for medical reasons, but he doesn't seem satisfied with that explanation. Tyler's always been possessive of Emma. He probably thinks he should have some say in her care because they work together. We need to make sure he understands that Brad is her next of kin now, and after the wedding, he'll be making all decisions about her treatment." "Speaking of treatment," the planner said, "has there been any change in her prognosis?" The venue needs to know if there's any possibility she might wake up before the ceremony. It would be awkward if she objected to the proceedings. Rachel was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was cold. "Dr. Chen has been overly optimistic about her chances. New physician will have a more realistic assessment of her condition. I don't think we need to worry about interruptions." After they left, I understood that the timeline was accelerating. They were finalizing details for the wedding in 6 days, and they were confident that I wouldn't be able to interfere. The mention of my new physician confirmed that Dr. Chen's replacement was already in place and cooperating with their plan. That evening brought the most encouraging development yet. Dr. Amanda Foster arrived for what appeared to be a routine neurological consultation, but her approach was clearly different from a standard medical examination. "Good evening, Emma," she said, settling into the chair beside my bed. "I'm Dr. Foster from the neurology department. Dr. Chen asked me to evaluate your progress and take over your care coordination." She performed a thorough examination, but her movements were careful and gentle, and she spoke to me as if she expected me to understand every word. "Your friend Tyler Martinez visited my office today," she said quietly. "He shared some very concerning information about the circumstances of your accident and the behavior of certain family members. Also mentioned that you had safety concerns about someone close to you before the accident occurred." Tyler was building the case systematically, connecting all the pieces of evidence he'd gathered. Dr. Foster's involvement meant that the investigation now had medical legitimacy and legal potential. "Tyler has asked me to perform an independent neurological assessment and to review all of your medical records since admission. What I found is very disturbing. There have been unauthorized medication adjustments that would keep you unconscious far longer than medically necessary. Someone has been deliberately prolonging your coma." She moved closer and lowered her voice even further. "Emma, Dr. Chen shared his suspicions with me before his transfer. If you can hear me and understand what I'm saying, I need you to know that we're going to protect you." But I also need to know if you're able to communicate in any way. This was my second chance to establish communication with an ally, using the same subtle techniques I'd used with Sophie. I let my breathing pattern shift slightly when Dr. Foster mentioned protection. "Very interesting," she murmured. "Let me try something else. Can you track this light with your eyes?" When she held up her pen light, I allowed my left eye to follow it briefly before stopping, as if the effort had exhausted me. "Remarkable. Emma, you're showing signs of consciousness that aren't reflected in your chart. Either your recovery is progressing much faster than documented, or someone has been misrepresenting your condition." She continued the examination, testing reflexes and responses while maintaining a steady conversation. "Tyler is working with a private investigator to analyze the mechanical evidence from your car accident. They've also been researching the financial backgrounds of people in your life. What they've discovered supports the theory that your accident was deliberately caused." This was exactly what I needed to hear. Tyler wasn't just asking random questions. He was conducting a professional investigation with expert help. "There's something else you need to know," Dr. Foster continued. "Hospital security has been alerted to unusual activity around your case.
Oh.
Someone with administrative access has been manipulating your treatment records, and we've identified the source. Steps are being taken to prevent further interference." The net was closing around the conspiracy, but I knew that would make them more dangerous, not less. Cornered criminals often became desperate, and desperate people made deadly mistakes. "Emma, I'm going to increase security around your room starting tomorrow. Official reason will be to monitor your improving condition more closely. Unofficial reason is to protect you from anyone who might want to prevent your recovery." As Dr. Foster prepared to leave, she delivered the most crucial information yet. "Tyler wanted me to tell you something specific. He said to tell you that he remembers what you told him about keeping evidence in a safe place. He's found what you hid, and it's exactly what we need to expose the truth. He said you'd understand what that means." I did understand. Before the accident, when I discovered Brad's suspicious emails and started questioning Rachel's newfound wealth, I'd made copies of important documents and stored them in a safety deposit box. Tyler knew about my habit of creating paper trails and keeping backup records. If he'd found that evidence, he had documentation of Brad's financial problems, Rachel's credit card debts, and possibly even communications about their plan. "Hold on just a little longer," Dr. Foster whispered. "Justice is coming, and you're going to be there to see it delivered." After she left, I felt more hopeful than I had since waking up. The investigation was progressing rapidly. I had medical protection, and the evidence needed to convict my attackers was already in Tyler's hands. But I also knew that the next few days would be the most dangerous yet. Brad and Rachel were committed to their timeline, and as their plans started to unravel, they'd become increasingly desperate to silence me permanently. The wedding was now only 5 days away, and with each passing hour, the stakes grew higher for everyone involved. The question was whether my allies could expose the conspiracy before my enemies found a way to complete their deadly plan. The chaos began at 3 a.m. on day 9. I'd been drifting in and out of genuine sleep when urgent voices in the hallway jolted me fully awake. Through my closed eyelids, I could see the harsh glare of emergency lighting flooding my room as multiple people rushed in. "Patient in 314 is showing signs of distress," someone called out. Heart rate elevated, blood pressure dropping, possible neurological event. But I felt fine. Better than fine, actually. My body was stronger each day, my mind clearer, my reflexes more responsive. Whatever was happening wasn't a medical emergency on my part. It was a manufactured crisis. "Get Dr. Morrison in here immediately," a voice ordered. Dr. Morrison, not Dr. Foster. They'd managed to override the protective arrangements that had been put in place. Heavy footsteps approached my bed, and I recognized the gravelly voice of Brad's hospital accomplice. "Looks like she's experiencing sudden deterioration. Very concerning given her recent improvement. We may need to consider more aggressive interventions." "What kind of interventions?" The question came from a nurse I didn't recognize. "Life support adjustments, increased sedation to prevent brain damage from potential seizures. Family should be notified immediately that her condition has become critical. They were staging a medical crisis to justify pumping me full of drugs or worse." The false emergency would give them cover to do whatever they wanted while appearing to provide urgent medical care. "I'll call the family," the nurse said, already moving toward the phone. Within 20 minutes, my room was crowded with people. Rachel arrived first, still in pajamas, but managing to look appropriately distraught. Brad followed, playing the role of the devoted fiancé, rushing to his beloved's bedside. Behind them came Mom, wringing her hands and asking frantic questions that no one answered directly. "What happened?" Rachel demanded. "She was stable yesterday. How could she suddenly get worse?" "Brain injuries are unpredictable," Dr. Morrison replied smoothly. "Sometimes patients show improvement before experiencing sudden deterioration. It's unfortunately common in cases like this." "Is she going to die?" Mom asked, her voice breaking. "We're doing everything we can to stabilize her condition. But I have to be honest with you, the next few hours are critical. You may want to consider making some difficult decisions about her care and life decisions." They were setting up the scenario where my grieving family would be forced to let me go rather than watch me suffer. It was brilliantly manipulative and completely evil. "What are our options?" Brad asked, stepping closer to my bed with perfectly performed anguish. "We can continue aggressive treatment, but there's a significant risk of brain damage even if she survives. Alternatively, we can focus on comfort care and allow natural progression." Natural progression meant letting them kill me slowly while my family believed they were making a compassionate choice. I had to do something to disrupt their performance, but any obvious sign of consciousness would put me in immediate danger. That's when Tyler's voice cut through the false solemnity. What exactly triggered this sudden change in her condition? I hadn't heard him arrive, but his presence sent a wave of relief through me. Tyler knew me too well to be fooled by medical theater, and his investigative instincts were already engaged. "Mr. Martinez," Dr. Morrison said with barely concealed irritation. "Family members are making medical decisions here. I'm not family, but I am Emma's emergency contact at Richardson Industries. And I have questions about the timeline of her deterioration. According to the nursing notes I was given access to yesterday, her vital signs were improving consistently. What changed in the last 6 hours?" Tyler had been monitoring my medical records. A smart man. "Sometimes improvement is followed by rapid decline," Dr. Morrison replied. "It's a well-documented phenomenon in traumatic brain injury cases. Is it because I've been researching traumatic brain injury patterns with a neurological consultant, and this doesn't match typical progression?" Profiles Dr. Foster was optimistic about Emma's recovery trajectory just yesterday. "Where is Dr. Foster, by the way?" "Dr. Foster is no longer assigned to this case. I'm the attending physician now." "Since when? And who authorized that change?" The tension in the room was escalating, and I could feel Brad growing agitated. Beside my bed, Tyler's questions were exposing the inconsistencies in their story, but that also made him a more immediate target. "Mr. Martinez," Brad interrupted, "this isn't the time for interrogation. Emma is fighting for her life here."
"Aye."
"That's exactly why it's the time for questions," Tyler shot back.
"Ah."
"Something about this situation doesn't add up, and I'm not going to stand here quietly while what?" Rachel demanded. "While my sister receives medical care?" "Tyler, I know you care about Emma, but you're not family. These decisions aren't yours to make." "No, but investigating potential medical malpractice is something I can do, and if I find evidence that Emma's treatment has been compromised, I'll make sure the appropriate authorities know about it." Dr. Morrison exchanged a quick glance with Brad that Tyler caught immediately. I could practically see Tyler's investigative instincts sharpening as he processed that nonverbal communication. "I think we should all step outside and let the medical team work," Mom suggested weakly. "This arguing isn't helping Emma." "Actually, I'd like to stay with her for a few minutes," Tyler said, alone if that's possible. "Sometimes familiar voices can help patients even when they appear unconscious." "I don't think that's appropriate," Dr. Morrison replied quickly. "Given her critical condition, 5 minutes," Tyler insisted. "Emma is my best friend, and if this is—" He let his voice break slightly, playing on their assumption that he was just an emotional friend. "If this might be goodbye, I need to talk to her." The performance was masterful. Tyler was using their own manipulation tactics against them, appealing to compassion, while positioning himself to gather information. After some reluctant discussion, they agreed to give him a few minutes alone with me. Once the room cleared, Tyler moved close to my bed and spoke in a low, urgent voice. "Emma, I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, I need you to listen carefully. Something is very wrong here. The medical crisis, the sudden change in doctors, the timing, it's all connected to what I've been investigating." He paused, and I could feel him studying my face. "I found the safety deposit box. I have all the documents you saved. Brad's financial records, Rachel's credit history, emails about insurance policies, everything. But I need more time to build the case, and I'm afraid they're not going to give us that time." Tyler's voice grew even quieter. "If you're conscious and pretending not to be, I understand why. But I need to know if you're in immediate danger so I can figure out how to protect you." This was the moment I'd been preparing for. Tyler was giving me a direct opportunity to communicate, and the room was temporarily clear of enemies. Using the breathing technique I'd practiced, I let my pattern shift noticeably when he mentioned immediate danger. "Holy shit," Tyler whispered. "You are awake. Emma, can you do that again?" I repeated the breathing signal. "Okay, listen to me very carefully. Dr. Foster is trying to get back on your case, but there's been administrative interference. Security is investigating irregularities in your treatment, but it's moving slowly. I've got evidence of financial motive for your accident, but I need proof of the actual conspiracy." I gave him the breathing signal for understanding. "The wedding is in 4 days. I think they're planning to kill you before then to clear any obstacles, or immediately after to claim your inheritance. Either way, we're running out of time." When I signaled again, Tyler took a sharp breath. "Can you identify who in the hospital is working with them?" I managed the slightest nod toward the door where Dr. Morrison had been standing. "Morrison. He's the one tampering with your treatment?" Breathing signal for yes. "Anyone else?" I tried to convey uncertainty, and Tyler seemed to understand. "Okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to create a distraction that forces them to move you to a different room or a different floor. Once you're away from Morrison's direct control, Dr. Foster can intervene. Yeah, but Emma, you have to be ready to act when the moment comes. Can you move if you absolutely have to?" I'd been secretly exercising my muscles during quiet moments, testing my strength and coordination. I wasn't at full capacity, but I could move if necessary. I gave him the breathing signal for yes. "Good, I'm also going to make sure there are witnesses around from now on. People they can't control or manipulate. When this goes down, we need credible observers who can testify to what really happened." Before Tyler could say more, voices approached in the hallway. He quickly stepped back from my bed and composed himself as the others returned. "How is she?" Rachel asked, studying Tyler's face for signs of whatever he might have discovered. "The same," Tyler replied carefully, "but I'm not leaving. If Emma's condition is as critical as Dr. Morrison says, then someone who cares about her should be here continuously." "That's not necessary," Brad said. "Rachel and I will be here. I'm sure you will. But as Emma's designated emergency contact for business matters, I have a right to be here too, and I'm exercising that right." The standoff was polite but unmistakable. Tyler had positioned himself as a permanent witness to whatever they were planning, and they couldn't remove him without raising suspicions. "Fine," Rachel said finally, "but don't interfere with her medical care. I wouldn't dream of it. I just want to make sure she gets the best possible treatment from qualified professionals." The emphasis on qualified was pointed, and Dr. Morrison's jaw tightened in response. Over the next few hours, Tyler proved to be a master of strategic disruption. When Dr. Morrison tried to adjust my 4 medications, Tyler asked detailed questions about dosages and drug interactions. When Brad suggested that perhaps they should consider end-of-life options, Tyler countered with research about successful recovery cases from similar injuries. Most importantly, Tyler had somehow arranged for a steady stream of visitors throughout the day. Colleagues from Richardson Industries stopped by to check on me. Members of the board of directors came too. Pay their respects. My personal trainer arrived with flowers and stayed to chat with Tyler about my fitness regimen and overall health before the accident. Each visitor was another witness, another person who could later testify about my condition and the behavior of people around me. Tyler was systematically documenting everything while making it impossible for Brad and Rachel to act without multiple observers. But the strategy also escalated the tension dramatically. I could feel Brad's growing frustration as his timeline was disrupted. Rachel was becoming increasingly agitated, snapping at nurses and demanding privacy for family decisions. Dr. Morrison was clearly under pressure to resolve the situation quickly. The breaking point came that evening when Tyler stepped out to take a phone call, leaving me alone with Brad and Rachel for the first time all day. They'd been waiting for this moment, and they wasted no time putting their backup plan into motion. "She's becoming a liability," Rachel hissed as soon as Tyler was out of earshot. "That friend of hers is asking too many questions, and he's not going to stop until he gets answers." "I know," Brad replied grimly. "We need to accelerate the timeline. Morrison says he can induce a brain hemorrhage that will look completely natural, sudden, fatal, impossible to trace. When? Tonight. Late shift has fewer staff, and Tyler will have to leave eventually. Once he's gone, Morrison will handle everything. By morning, Emma will be gone, and we can focus on damage control." "What about Tyler's investigation? Tragic friend destroyed by grief, maybe driven to some desperate act. Accidents happen to people who ask too many questions. They were planning to murder both Tyler and me within hours. The casual way they discussed it made my skin crawl, but it also filled me with cold determination. I'd heard enough, had enough evidence, and I was done being a passive victim in their twisted game. But I also knew that the next few hours would determine whether I lived to see justice served or died in this hospital room while they walked away with everything I'd worked for. Tyler's plan had bought me time and protection, but now we were entering the most dangerous phase of the entire ordeal. The wedding was 3 days away, but I was beginning to suspect that neither Tyler nor I would live to see it unless we could turn the tables on our enemies before they struck first. At 11:30 that night, Tyler made his move. I'd been watching the clock on the wall, counting down the minutes until the late shift would leave me vulnerable to Dr. Morrison's final solution. But Tyler had other plans. "For a phone call," he announced to the room. "K, important business from overseas. Should take about 20 minutes. Rachel's relief was visible. "Of course. Take your time." Right. But Tyler didn't leave the building. Instead, he headed straight to hospital security and activated the plan he'd been arranging all day. Within minutes, Detective Maria Santos arrived, with 2 uniformed officers, followed by Dr. Foster and a hospital administrator I didn't recognize. "We're here to investigate allegations of patient endangerment and potential criminal activity," Detective Santos announced as she entered my room with the group. "No one leaves until we get some answers." Shock on Brad and Rachel's faces was priceless. Dr. Morrison tried to protest that this was disrupting critical patient care, but Dr. Foster cut him off. "Actually, doctor, your care has been anything but critical. In fact, it's been criminally negligent." She moved to my bedside and began checking my 4 lines. "This patient has been receiving unauthorized sedatives for over a week. Medications that weren't prescribed, weren't documented, and weren't medically necessary. That's impossible." Dr. Morrison sputtered. "I've been following standard protocols for traumatic brain injury. Have you?" Dr. Foster pulled out a tablet and began reading. "Because according to the real medical records, Emma Richardson has been showing signs of consciousness for days, yet somehow those observations never made it into the official charts." Detective Santos stepped forward with a recording device. "Tyler Martinez has provided us with some very interesting evidence. Financial records, insurance documents, mechanical analysis of the vehicle involved in Miss Richardson's accident. But we need more than circumstantial evidence to make arrests." That's when Tyler revealed his masterstroke, which is why I've been recording everything that's happened in this room for the past 8 hours. He pulled out his phone and showed a video recording application that had been running continuously. Every conversation, every threat, every admission of guilt. Including the conversation 20 minutes ago where Brad Mitchell and Rachel Richardson discussed murdering both Emma and me tonight. The blood drained from Rachel's face. "That's illegal. Can't record people without consent." "Actually, I can," Tyler replied calmly. "One-party consent state, and as Emma's designated emergency contact, I have the legal right to monitor her care for her protection, Everything you said in this room is admissible evidence. Detective Santos smiled grimly. Mr. Martinez, would you mind playing back the section where they discussed the planned murder? Tyler scrolled through his phone and found the recording. Brad and Rachel's voices filled the room, discussing brain hemorrhages, timeline acceleration, and making Tyler disappear. The casual way they'd planned our deaths was even more chilling when played back to their faces. That's taken out of context, Brad protested desperately. We were discussing medical options, hypothetical scenarios. Were you also discussing hypothetical scenarios when you arranged to have Emma's brakes sabotaged? Detective Santos asked. Because we have evidence of that too. She nodded to one of the uniformed officers, who stepped forward with an evidence folder. Forensic analysis of the brake lines from your vehicle, Miss Richardson. They were deliberately cut in a way designed to cause failure at highway speeds. The cut marks match tools found in Mr. Mitchell's construction equipment. We also have financial records showing both defendants were in severe debt before Miss Richardson's accident, the detective continued. Mr. Mitchell's construction company was facing bankruptcy. Miss Richardson owed over $200,000 in credit card debt and had been declined for multiple loans. Dr. Foster moved closer to my bed. Emma, I know you can hear me. We have enough evidence to protect you now. You don't have to pretend anymore. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Slowly, carefully, I opened my eyes and looked directly at Rachel. The expression of absolute terror on her face was worth every moment of fear and helplessness I'd endured. Hello, sister, I said, my voice hoarse but clear. Enjoying my wedding dress? Rachel stumbled backward, crashing into the visitor's chair. This is impossible. She's been unconscious for weeks. Actually, I've been awake for over a week, I said, slowly sitting up in bed with Dr. Foster's assistance. Long enough to hear every detail of your conspiracy to murder me. Brad made a sudden movement toward the door, but the uniformed officers blocked his path. Going somewhere, Mr. Mitchell? We haven't finished our conversation yet. A lawyer, Brad said, his charm and confidence completely evaporated. You'll get one, Detective Santos replied. Right after we finish collecting evidence? Dr. Morrison, you're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and medical malpractice. Dr. Morrison had been trying to slip out of the room unnoticed, but Tyler caught his arm. Not so fast. Doc, you're the one who's been keeping Emma drugged against her will. That's kidnapping at minimum. I was following orders from hospital administration, Dr. Morrison protested. Whose orders specifically? The hospital administrator demanded. Because I can assure you that no one in legitimate administration authorized anything you've done. As the handcuffs came out, Rachel made one last desperate attempt at manipulation. Mom, tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Emma's been unconscious. She's confused, probably brain damaged. She doesn't know what she's saying. But Mom had been standing in the corner, listening to everything with growing horror. Rachel, how could you do this? Emma is your sister. I raised you better than this. You raised me to be second best to perfect Emma, Rachel snarled, her mask finally slipping completely. She got the trust fund. She got the inheritance. She got everything while I got nothing. I deserved that money more than she did. You deserved it enough to kill for it, Mom asked, tears streaming down her face. I didn't kill anyone. She's fine, isn't she? Still breathing? Still talking? Still going to ruin everything like she always does? Detective Santos read Rachel her right, while another officer did the same for Brad. Dr. Morrison was led away by hospital security, protesting his innocence the entire way down the hall. Detective Santos said once the room had cleared. Somewhat, we're going to need a full statement from you. But first, do you need medical attention? Dr. Foster, is she well enough to be interviewed? She's remarkably healthy considering what she's been through, Dr. Foster replied. The unauthorized sedatives were keeping her unconscious, but they didn't cause any permanent damage. With proper care, she should make a complete recovery. Tyler approached my bed with tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry it took me so long to figure out what was happening. If I'd been faster, you saved my life, I interrupted. If you hadn't started investigating, if you hadn't protected me today, they would have succeeded. You're the reason I'm alive. When did you first suspect something was wrong? Detective Santos asked. settling into the chair with her notepad. The night of the accident, I replied. I'd found emails on Brad's laptop discussing the Richardson situation and a backup plan. I was driving to confront him when my brakes failed, but I knew for certain it wasn't accidental when I woke up and saw Rachel wearing my wedding dress. You've been conscious for 8 days without anyone knowing? I realized immediately that if they knew I was awake, they'd kill me before I could expose them. So I pretended to still be in a coma while I gathered evidence and waited for an opportunity to get help. I have recordings of them discussing the inheritance terms, the insurance policies, plans to eliminate witnesses, hours of conversation where they incriminate themselves completely. What about the hospital staff involvement? The detective asked. Dr. Morrison was the primary conspirator, I replied. He was adjusting my medications to keep me unconscious and was prepared to induce a fatal brain hemorrhage tonight. But there were others. Someone with administrative access was manipulating my records and arranging for protective staff members to be transferred or sent on vacation. The hospital administrator looked grim. We'll be conducting a full internal investigation. Anyone involved in this conspiracy will face termination and criminal charges. Over the next hour, I gave Detective Santos a complete statement about everything I'd observed and overheard during my conscious period. Tyler provided his recordings and all the evidence he'd gathered during his investigation. Dr. Foster documented the medical malpractice and unauthorized treatments. What happens to the wedding? I asked after we'd covered all the legal details. What wedding? Detective Santos replied with a slight smile.
Oh.
To commit murder, insurance fraud, and about a dozen other felonies. I don't think either of them will be available for social events for the next 20 to 30 years. The venue should probably be notified, Tyler suggested. And the guests. This is going to be a pretty big news story. Actually, I said, an idea forming. I think I'll handle the wedding situation personally. I have some things I want to say to the people who are planning to celebrate my stolen life. Detective Santos looked concerned. Emma, I understand you're angry, but you should probably focus on your recovery and let the legal system handle justice. Oh, I'm going to let the legal system handle justice, I replied. But first, I'm going to handle the satisfaction. The next morning brought a parade of visitors to my hospital room. Word had spread quickly through the Richardson Industries network that I was awake and recovering. Board members, employees, family friends, and business associates all came to express their relief and support. But the most important visitor was Sophie Chen, Dr. Chen's daughter, who arrived with a bouquet of flowers and a huge smile. Emma, I'm so glad you're okay, she said, giving me a careful hug. My father sends his regards. He's back on the cardiac floor, but he wanted you to know how proud he is that his instincts about your case were correct. Please tell your father that his protection saved my life, I replied. If he hadn't arranged for Dr. Foster to take over my care, I wouldn't be here talking to you. He also wanted me to give you this, Sophie said, handing me an envelope. It's a letter he wrote documenting everything he observed about your case. He thought you might want it for your records. Inside the envelope was a detailed timeline of all the suspicious activities Dr. Chen had noticed, the unauthorized medication changes, the administrative interference, and his growing suspicions about my family's behavior. It was thorough, professional, and would serve as additional evidence in the criminal proceedings. There's one more thing, Sophie said, lowering her voice. The hospital has asked if you're planning to file a civil lawsuit for malpractice. Apparently the legal department is very concerned about liability. I smiled. Tell them they don't need to worry about me suing the hospital. The real criminals are already in custody, and I'm grateful for the staff members who protected me. But I am going to make sure that what happened to me never happens to another patient. What do you mean? I mean, I'm going to use this experience to push for changes in hospital security protocols, patient advocacy procedures, and oversight of medical decision-making. If something positive can come out of this nightmare, it should be better protection for other vulnerable patients. That afternoon, Tyler returned with news about the investigation's progress. The police searched Rachel's apartment and found more evidence, he reported. Financial planning documents, research about inheritance law, even a timeline for the whole conspiracy. She kept detailed records of everything. What about Brad? His construction office had evidence of the brake tampering tools, plus communications with the person who actually did the sabotage. Turns out, he hired a mechanic to make the modifications, paid him in cash, and then tried to intimidate him into staying quiet. Did the mechanic cooperate with police? Completely. Once he realized he'd been part of a murder plot, he couldn't talk fast enough. Brad told him it was just meant to scare you, make you think your car was unreliable. The mechanic had no idea it was meant to cause a fatal accident. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering, but so was the volume of evidence against them. Between Tyler's recordings, the financial documentation, the forensic evidence from my car, and the testimony of multiple witnesses, the prosecution would have an overwhelming case. "There's one more thing you should know," Tyler said. "Your mother wants to see you. She's been waiting outside for hours, but she's afraid you won't want to talk to her." I thought about that for a moment. Mom had been manipulated and used, but she'd also been willfully blind to Rachel's true nature and had signed documents that put me in danger. "Send her in," I said finally. "We have a lot to discuss." Mom entered the room looking like she'd aged 10 years in 10 days. Her usually perfect makeup was smeared, her designer clothes wrinkled, and her hands shook as she approached my bed. "Emma, sweetheart, I don't know how to begin apologizing," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I had no idea what Rachel was planning. Thought she was just trying to help, trying to keep the family together during a terrible time. "You signed power of attorney documents, giving her control over my medical decisions," I replied, keeping my voice calm but firm. "You didn't think to question why she was so eager to take on that responsibility. She said it was because she loved you, because she wanted to protect you from having to make difficult choices if you woke up confused or damaged." Mom wiped her eyes with a tissue. I realize now how naive that sounds, but Rachel has always been so emotional, so caring about family. Caring enough to steal my identity, my fiancé, and my inheritance, I said. "Mom, the signs were there. Rachel's sudden wealth, Brad's strange behavior, the timing of everything. You chose not to see it because it was easier than confronting the truth." Mom broke down completely then, sobbing into her hands. "You're right. I failed you as a mother. I enabled Rachel's behavior because I felt guilty about the inheritance structure your father set up. She always resented that you got more, and I thought if I supported her this time, it would balance things out. By letting her steal my life, I didn't know she was stealing anything. I thought you were unconscious, that the wedding was a way to honor your wishes and help Brad through his grief. When she said the doctors thought you might never wake up, it seemed like the right thing to do." I studied my mother's face, seeing genuine remorse but also the weakness that had allowed this situation to develop. "Mom, Rachel didn't just steal my dress and my fiancé. She tried to murder me. Twice, she sabotaged my car, kept me drugged, and was planning to kill me in this hospital bed. This wasn't about evening the score or family loyalty. This was about $50 million and a willingness to commit murder to get it." "I know that now," Mom whispered, "and I'll never forgive myself for not protecting you." We talked for another hour, working through years of family dynamics that had led to this crisis. Mom agreed to testify honestly in the criminal proceedings and to undergo counseling to understand how she'd been manipulated. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a starting point. 2 days later, I was released from the hospital with a clean bill of health. The unauthorized sedatives had left my system completely. Dr. Foster confirmed that I'd suffered no lasting effects from the prolonged unconsciousness. Tyler drove me home to my condo, which had been sealed as a crime scene but was now cleared for occupancy. "It's good to have you back in the real world," Tyler said as we pulled into my parking garage. "Though I have to admit, the last week has been the most intense experience of my life." "Mine too," I replied. "But we make a pretty good team when we're fighting for survival." "Speaking of fighting, have you decided what you want to do about the Richardson Industries situation?" "The board is waiting for direction from you." I'd been thinking about that during my recovery. The company my father built was still mine to run, but the experience had changed my perspective on what really mattered. "I'm promoting you too, Chief Operating Officer," I announced. "You've proven you can handle anything, and I trust you completely. I want to take a step back from day-to-day operations and focus on some new projects." What kind of projects? Patient advocacy. Hospital. Security reform? Financial fraud prevention? I want to create programs that protect vulnerable people from the kind of predators that targeted me. Tyler smiled. That sounds like the Emma Richardson I know. It's always turning a personal disaster into a way to help other people. The criminal. TRIAL took place 6 months later. Rachel, Brad, and Dr. Morrison all pled guilty to avoid the death penalty, accepting life sentences instead. The mechanic who'd sabotaged my car received a lighter sentence in exchange for his cooperation. Several hospital administrators were fired for negligence and faced civil penalties. They testified at the sentencing hearing, not for revenge but to ensure the judge understood the full scope of what they'd planned. Your Honor, I said, these defendants didn't just try to steal my inheritance. They orchestrated a systematic campaign of attempted murder, medical malpractice, and psychological torture. They were willing to kill not just me, but my best friend Tyler, and potentially anyone else who threatened their plan. The only reason I'm alive today is because of my own deception and the courage of healthcare workers who risked their careers. To protect me, Rachel tried to interrupt my statement, claiming I was exaggerating, but the judge silenced her immediately. The evidence in this case speaks for itself, the judge replied. Miss Richardson, your courage in gathering evidence while in an extremely vulnerable position has likely saved not only your own life, but the lives of others these defendants were prepared to eliminate. The sentences will reflect the severity and premeditation of their crimes. Rachel received life without parole. Brad got life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Dr. Morrison received 25 to life. Justice was served, but it felt hollow compared to the relationships and trust that had been destroyed. 1 year later, I stood in the chapel where my original wedding was supposed to take place. But this time, I wasn't there as a bride. I was there to dedicate the Emma Richardson Patient Advocacy Center, a nonprofit organization I'd created with part of my inheritance. The center provided legal representation for patients who suspected medical malpractice, financial counseling for families dealing with healthcare fraud, security consulting for hospitals wanting to improve their patient protection protocols. We'd already helped dozens of people avoid situations similar to what I'd experienced. Tyler stood beside me as I cut the ribbon, along with Dr. Foster, Sophie Chen, Nurse Patty, and even Detective Santos, who'd become a friend during the investigation and trial. This center represents something important, I said to the gathered crowd. It proves that no matter how powerless you might feel in a hospital bed, no matter how much people you trust might betray you, there's always hope. There are always people willing to fight for truth and justice. After the ceremony, Tyler and I walked through the memorial garden we'd created behind the center. It honored victims of medical fraud and family violence, people who hadn't been as lucky as I'd been. Any regrets? Tyler asked. About what? Not getting married? Not having the fairy tale ending? Losing your sister and the fiancés you thought you loved? Thought about that for a moment. You know what I learned? During those 8 days of pretending to be unconscious, the people who truly love you don't need you to be helpless to care for you. They don't need you to be unconscious to be loyal. They definitely don't need $50 million to stay by your side. Like me, like you. You risked your life to save mine. You never wavered, never doubted, never gave up. That's what real love looks like. Not romance necessarily, but true, dependable, life-worth loyalty. Tyler smiled and took my hand. So what happens next for Emma Richardson? I looked back at the center, thinking about all the people we'd help, all the predators we'd stop, all the vulnerable patients who'd be safer because of what I'd survived. Next, I keep fighting, not for money or inheritance or fairy tale endings, but for people who can't fight for themselves. And I do it with the best partner I could ask for. Now that, Tyler said, sounds like a happy ending to me. As we walked back toward the center, I realized he was right. Not the ending I'd planned when I was picking out wedding dresses and dreaming about my future with Brad, but an ending that was real, meaningful, and built on truth rather than deception. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's building something better from the ashes of what was destroyed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.